Here's what I'm going to try and cover in my commentary. Hello, YouTube friends. In my commentary today, spontaneous and random insights from the artists in the studio. There's still artists out there making their work. What I'm thinking of covering, I'm thinking somewhat a little bit about certain issues. The most important one that I'd like to cover is that all history since 3/11/11 is actually a false flag, meaning that after the Fukushima plant blew up, all events are basically in place to divert us from this event. That's sort of my most important point. What I'd like to cover within that and all the false flags, anything I talk about outside of Fukushima, are basically essentially false flags. And what I'd like to cover is the in the gutter culture, and the good in life is certainty. The idea of the writing is on the wall, and this refers to art that is considered graffiti, which is fundamentally a metaphor for that saying that the writing's on the wall. If you look at graffiti artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat, who became the iconic artist of the 20th century, even surpassing Warhol to some extent. He was a graffiti artist, meaning that the writing is on the wall. Their insight came as metaphors. The art itself is merely a metaphor for that expression, the idea that the writing is on the wall. And this is how I see all graffiti. Graffiti is, in essence, it's a very it's a brutalization in a sense of what we consider to be of value. Anything of value, true value to us, is like creating gutter culture. Although there are aspects to it that I appreciate, I still think that the fundamental aspect of graffiti art is the writing is on the wall. And then you have the false flag ideas like this Vegas shooting. Oh, geez, the shooter was on the 32nd floor. Oh, that's really interesting, the 32nd floor. And Bitcoins and the Catalans demanding their independence now. And the idea that if I'm right, which is a reflection on the idea that a lot of people have opinions and thoughts. And like myself, I have opinions and thoughts. When it comes to making a painting, I think I have credibility based on the idea that I've been doing it for a while. And if I'm right, that's sort of a topic. And I'm thinking the kerfuffle lately about the athletes kneeling down on the field, and basically that entire genre of expression to actually pray for a system of conformity with what are known as anthems, national anthems. Pray for a system of conformity. Why would I align myself with that? And I was thinking too recently that the notion, what I bring up frequently, is that cancer, rather than just an epidemic, is rivaling the plague. I see it as rivaling the plague, that if you look into history and you had monumental die-offs of people, I'm talking about people now, monumental die-offs of people in history, like the plague, cancer is a version of the plague, and it's going unnoticed. So these were kind of the topics I was thinking about today. And I sort of covered the idea of writing on the wall, graffiti art. It represents the writing is on the wall people. That's what these people were sensitive to in terms of identifying the time. Did they identify the time with the language they created? No. It has it's a regurgitation of the art brute. You have artists that represented that. Appel, the Cobra group. Check out Cobra, Corneille, Appel, de Buffet, even Soutine in some regard. People that brutalized the medium, and I appreciate that. I am wholeheartedly on board with the idea of brutalizing something that hasn't worked in the sense of making a painting in a traditional sense. It hasn't really brought us the enlightenment that we're looking for. So the graffiti artists like Basquiat basically alerted us to the writing is on the wall. And what is the writing that is on the wall? Well, he went into a tirade of a kind of representation of the lowest of the low in terms of our humanity, that feeling, but creating an intellectual context. You have a lot of art critics and people talking about this art within the realm of an intellectual context, an aesthetic, what is called an aesthetic. Like Barnett Newman said, the aesthetics is to an artist what ornithology is to the birds. And I think that made a lot of sense when he said it. He was a clever people in the past. And now what I basically started out on saying that everything since 3/11/11, when the Fukushima plant blew up, what happened was the most monumental events ever to have occurred from an environmental point of view on the earth, that a man-made technology failed utterly and totally when this plant blew up. And it represents, for me, it represents the idea of progress, which is implanted in our minds from when we're tiny little children and we go to school and we sit in environments that are totally arbitrary and ridiculous. Everybody has to fit into their little desk. It is impressed upon us that this is all for the good because it's going to be progress. We're going to go towards some kind of progress. Progress is good. So we have to learn within a system that is confined by rules and laws that have never worked, but it's all for the sake of progress. And progress led us through these brilliant people that we call scientists, who invented a technology that fundamentally could destroy everything on this earth. And people who say nuclear is a hoax, they're absolute fucking degenerates. I have no regard for these people. The way Dana Durnford goes on about this in terms of his disdain, his utter total disdain for people who are held up as such important, they're so important to us. And this is all tied in. The reason they get away with it is because the idea of progress has been implanted in our brains since we were tiny little children, that we have to sacrifice ourselves at the altar of progress. And the main part in this, for me, is the idea that everything after 3/11/11 is a false flag, because this has implanted itself fundamentally in every breathing human brain cell, in every human being that has still some vestige of this heart beating in their chest. This event implanted itself, a friend said it's irregardless double negative. Regardless of what anyone might say in terms of explaining something, this is beyond explanation, beyond reason, beyond even emotion in a sense. This is a primordial communication that we're under threat. This has occurred. So this event has fundamentally implanted itself in all people, whether or not they want to recognize it or not. This is obviously, with all the information out there which hasn't worked, there are other ways of bringing people to this notion within themselves, which is why I say we need to do our inner work in order to have that ability, that schooling within ourselves. We practice it every day to unleash that inner self that wants to come out, that alien that wants to come out from our inner self, that alien that probably needs to be extricated in order to get to the good angel, or whatever that inner part of us is that allows us to continue in a way that works. And all events that have occurred or are occurring, like the shooting. Okay, let's just sort of touch on the shooting and then the Catalans. The shooting in Vegas, which apparently happened from the 32nd floor. Oh, geez, why not the 33rd floor? The 32nd, they're not quite there yet. You see, the 32nd floor is an indication that there's something hokey-pokey going on here, because why not choose the 33rd floor? because the 33rd degree is a much higher degree than the 32nd. So we haven't seen the full picture yet. That's what I'm saying with this. We haven't seen the full picture yet. Research Freemasonic rites and the 32nd and 33rd degree. Albert Pike, Aleister Crowley. And there were shootings coming apparently off the 4th floor. So there were more shooters, apparently. There are so many anomalies in this story, but again, this will deviate, this will take us down another path, and these paths are being revisited with the London stabbings and the Madrid bombings, and in every country is basically the grounds for creating these false stories that will divert us from what's really bothering us terribly deep down. We are terribly afflicted by what has occurred, whether we want to recognize it or not. As a painter, for whatever reason, and there aren't too many of us left out there that have this ability or have exercised on a day-to-day sense this ability to extract the most meaningful part of our existence, which is referred to in art as identifying the time. Not only in art, but to identify the time, art, generally speaking, has this quality that it can focus a population on something that's important. This comes through art history. I'm not making this up. If you look in art history, artists, the brilliant artists, were able to focus the population on that which was really important and meaningful. So all events since March 11th, 2011 are essentially, and all people dealing with events happening day to day without touching on this topic, are basically false flags. That's how I see it. They're false flags. And the stories that people tell us, and like I said in my last video, as long as we're caught in the headlights of all these stories, we're going to be on the defensive. As activists, as nuclear activists, which is the most important activism in terms of the environment, it far surpasses what anybody, the hoax of CO2. This is incredible. The CO2 deception has really taken over, which is an extraction of wealth. It was invented by Al Gore and company to extract wealth from people, because CO2 is something I am breathing out as I speak. I create CO2. We're all dirty bastards, right? Just because it's there. And we need to really have a heart check on this. Even environmentalists, as much as I love your commitment and dedication to this cause, it's not what's creating the climate that's out there. Let me put it this way. The man-made CO2 is minuscule compared to if a volcano blows up and eliminates enormous amounts or ejects enormous amounts of CO2 into the environment. And you have the entire methane issue that's also bubbling up from underneath. So what we're facing in terms of what I consider to be man-made that is of significance, it's not the CO2, it's the nuclear pollution, the toxicity, which leads me to this point that I made, that cancer rivals the plague. I'm convinced of this, that cancer in a historical sense will rival the plague and will eliminate a huge portion of the population, very likely, if we can actually get this nuclear monster under control, maybe as many as 2/3 of the population, like in history. If you look at the medieval times when the plague rampaged through Europe and eliminated 2/3 of the population, we're facing maybe even a larger event than that. And we're right in it, and people don't know it. Or let me say it this way, people have not let this sift through into the frontal lobes, the upper layers of our awareness. And if I'm right, the people that come and argue and say, well, nuclear is a hoax, fine, okay. Take the position that this has all been a fabrication to deflect us away from what? From what? Why would nuclear be a hoax? Why would anybody make up this shit about nuclear? Well, what's the point? I don't see it. You see, I don't see why you want to create a hoax out of something that isn't hoaxable in that sense. What value is there in nuclear being a hoax? Let's say that I'm wrong, and nuclear is a hoax, we got nothing to worry about. So why attack me? It's just some flake going off. Why do I, a lowly artist in the middle of nowhere, get targeted by numerous channels to shut me up and have a campaign of thumbs down against my videos? So what? It's my opinion. Why do you feel so threatened by some lowly artist having an opinion about something that is of no significance, like Galen Windsor swimming in the fuel pools? That fool who was an employee of that industry. Why would you believe somebody like that? You see, the idea that to say that nuclear is a hoax is so absurd, because if it isn't a hoax and I'm right, we're in the shitter. If I'm wrong, so what? So what? Okay, you think my opinion will actually prevent these people from extracting all the wealth through a hoax industry called nuclear. Well, nuclear is a hoax from the point of view that they're extracting wealth and not producing any benefit to us, not even on the energy side of things, because it draws more energy out of our existence than what it puts into it. It's a negative energy. It's not a positive energy, but they're charging for us anyway. So it is a hoax in that regard. But it certainly is not a hoax. It certainly is not a hoax from the point of view that it's created the most exotic toxins ever on this earth. It shouldn't exist on the earth, like it doesn't exist anywhere else in the cosmos. Hello. So I went through a number of points, and my main point is that all history since 3/11/11 is a false flag, as far as I'm concerned. So all the reporting you get from all these fabulous channels that have insights, to all the esoteric people like Freeman Fly, I like this guy too, or Rich Planet, what's his name, the British guy, and Richie Allen, and even Alex Jones, well, he's a suspect big time. All these channels, SGT report, everyone who ignores fundamentally this event are basically contributing to a false flag. That's how I see it. So the Vegas thing, of course, it's a manipulation of some kind that we're going to be caught in the headlights, like I said in my last video. As long as we're caught in the headlights of their narrative, they're laughing. And one last note, that the whole idea of YouTube to me is really phenomenal from the point of view that it is a strategy by the people that are running the show, which is not working. It's working for a small group, but it's not working for the population, have introduced this medium called YouTube, and it's now working incredibly well on behalf of their narrative, because even people like myself, or people that are in opposition to, create enough uncertainty. And I'm not talking about a good uncertainty. I'm talking about this fundamental sort of uncertainty about ourselves, what we truly feel. We're made to question within ourselves, something that we're certain of within ourselves, which is, as far as my worldview is concerned, is to follow our calling. When that becomes undermined, which is part of YouTube, that if you create enough uncertainty and doubt among a population, you're going to win. You're going to win, because we're all like going this way, that way. We're all over the place. We're completely divided everywhere. I think I covered the points that I want to do. Oh, maybe the Catalans. Oh, this is fabulous. I lived in Spain for on and off for 9 years. I had a studio there over in the warm, when it was cold here and it was warm there. I was fortunate to be able to have a studio in Spain. And Catalonia is a very prosperous area of Spain. They don't want to let this part go, because Barcelona and the Catalans, they have their own language. It's maybe a version of Spanish. I didn't understand the Catalans. I learned a little bit of Spanish over the time. But these people are now demanding their right. They see the writing on the wall. The graffiti is there for them. But in the scheme of things, you see what I'm saying? whether or not they get their independence, it's all a false flag, because ultimately, no matter how successful you are, if you don't address this fundamental problem that we're facing, that everybody knows, everyone knows this, that we're under threat, there is no point. There is no point. And if I'm right, this needs to come out in the biggest possible way. If I'm wrong, it's just some flaky artist going off. But why then have a campaign against me with your stupid thumbs down on very few views? It makes no sense, you see. It makes no sense. So I know I'm on the right track, and this medium is being manipulated and used to distract the population from what it is that they really want. I'm not saying need, want to focus on. That's what's happening. And cancer rivals the plague. That's what I think. Cancer is rivaling the plague because of nuclear.